Om Parthaya Pradibodhidam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gradhidam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Rudavashinim Bhagavadim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manusandadhami Bhagavad Gite Bhavadveshinim Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marudastunnandi Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangapada Panishadai Gayantiyam Samagaha Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyandiyam Yogino Yasyandam Navidusura Suraganah Devaya Tasmai Namaha. We were discussing the 28th verse of the 6th chapter, Dhyana Yoga of Bhagavad Gita. So 28 verses, Yunjannevam Sadatmanam Yogi Vigata Kalmashaha Sukhena Brahma Samsparsham Atyantam Sukham Asnuti. So one expression is there, Atyantam Sukham. That is the ultimate joy, the happiness, contentment that is permanent, and that happiness, that Atyantam Sukham, the ultimate spiritual contentment, is not just an absence of unhappiness. It is happiness itself in its essence. So here is the Sanskrit word used, Atyantam Sukham, the ultimate joy. Joy is perhaps not an adequate expression to translate the true implication of Atyantam Sukham. It is a state of spiritual growth and spiritual evolution. It is not a state of insensitivity or inaction or inertia. Rather, it is a feeling of being permanently settled in a state of contentment. We may have to face difficulties and challenges in material life. You find if you read the lives of many great spiritual teachers, even the Lord Krishna himself, the Lord himself, the teacher himself, if you read his life, he had a very busy life. He played these multiple roles of a teacher, a guide, a statesman, and a warrior who fought to protect the virtuous people, to protect the weak and the unprotected. So his whole life was devoted to doing good for others in so many different ways. As an advisor, as a spiritual preceptor, as a teacher, as a friend, and so on. But if we read his life and of course Lord Krishna's instructions in the Gita, you are coming across a mind that could react to different situations without being ever unsettled by any challenges or problems. That's because he was fully established in a state of contentment. There was nothing for him to achieve. Name parthasti kartavyam trishu lokeshu kinchana nanavaptam avaptavyam varte evacha karmani. Name parthasti kartavyam trishu lokeshu kinchana. Lord Krishna says, there is nothing that I have to do, that I am bound to do for my own sake. That's the implication. There is nothing that you are obliged to do. Still varte vacha karmani, karmani varteva. Still the Lord was always engaged in doing different things for the sake of others. for the protection and happiness of others. So that is a state of spiritual evolution and spiritual growth. In fact, Lord Bhashyakara, the great commentator of the Gita, Srimad Shankara Bhagavad himself, he gives a very brief but very comprehensive interpretation of who is such a yogi who experiences this inner bliss, this inner happiness, inner contentment, and why that experience is called Atyantam Sukham, ultimate, absolute, transcendental spiritual blessedness. So Bhashyakara says, Yunjan evam yathoktena kramena yogi. So this yogi we are talking about, this great, here yogi here means a spiritual seeker who is experiencing every moment in his life, in his every action, in his every work, his unity with the transcendental, all-pervading, supreme, divine reality. So Jiva Brahma Aikyam, that's what we call in Sanskrit. A feeling of unity and oneness, spiritual unity and spiritual oneness with the whole existence. So you are one with the whole existence, so there is nothing for you in particular to achieve. So that state of spiritual contentment, when it becomes a real experience, such a person is called a yogi here. It has nothing at all to do with hatha yoga or physical exercises. So Bhashyakara calls such a yogi Yogantaraya Varjitaha. That is a very, very comprehensive explanation. The simple word Yogantaraya Varjitaha. Antaraya. Antaraya means obstacles in spiritual life. It's taken from Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Bhashyakara himself wrote a commentary on Yoga Sutra's Bhashya by Vyasa. So, Sri Shankaracharya wrote a commentary called Vivarana, which is a commentary, sub-commentary on Vyasa's commentary on Yoga Sutras. So, the sutra is this: Vyadhi Sthyana Samsaya Pramada Alasya Aviradi Bhranti Darshana Alabdha Bhumigatva Anavasthitattvani Chitta Vikshepaha Te Antarayaha. So what are these antarayas? Te antarayaha. What are these obstacles? See, there are certain obstacles that you start confronting only when you step into spiritual life. It's just like you are swimming against the current of nature, the current of brutal biological nature. Nature itself cannot push you forward, cannot direct you, cannot take you to the ultimate spiritual evolution, which is actually transcending the pulse of nature. So, spiritual life is in a way moving against nature, against our own natural instinct. Our natural instinct is the product of our senses. When they come in contact with different sense objects, when we see certain things, a great attraction for it, or an aversion towards it. When we hear, when we touch, when we smell, when we taste, a good food, a great attraction, and bad food, an aversion. So this is how the mind works when mind is driven by the senses towards sense objects. So in spiritual life, we are actually taking the senses away from sense objects, and you are actually trying to turn the mind towards its true inner chamber towards buddhi and slowly towards Atman. So in spiritual life, you are traveling inward, traveling towards your own spiritual nature, which is the opposite of natural instincts. So there will be a lot of problems, obstacles. It's common for any spiritual seeker to face challenges. You never come to know that there are such problems and challenges to be faced in spiritual life till we turn to spiritual life. Mind creates problems, doubts. Sometimes mind becomes erratic. In fact, it's called samsaya pramada. Samsaya means doubt, irrational doubt. Pramada means a natural tendency of the mind to make mistakes, pramada, becoming erratic. So, 9 such obstacles are outlined here. And a yogi is able to, a spiritually advanced person is able to derive this great joy, this great inner blessedness and happiness, because he is completely free from all these obstacles. When all these obstacles fail to move his mind, distract his mind, when the mind is so steady, not being distracted by these obstacles, such a person is called Yogantaraya Varjitaga, a person from whom all antarayas to yoga life have become extinct, have disappeared, have gone away. So, Vyadhi, Sthana, Samsaya, Pramada, Alasya, Aviradi, Bhranti Darshana, Alabdha Bhumigatvam, Anavasthitatvam. These are the 9 obstacles. First one is Vyadhi. Sometimes, mind and body become sick. Thoughts also can make body sick. And sometimes when your body is sick, that sick body also can cause wrong thoughts, because body influences the mind and mind also influences the body, both ways. So that kind of problem, mostly according to Ayurvedic principle, they call dhatu vaishamya weakness. So that's called Vyadhi, illness, disease, mental delusions or physical illnesses. The second obstacle is sthana, means laziness. Sometimes when we think of the time, it's time to meditate, immediately a feeling of laziness, lethargy. That again creates some other problems. So postponement, it comes here again, the next context it comes. Sthana means a tendency to become lazy and lethargic. And then samsaya means we listen, we read, but still there is a lingering doubt within. It becomes almost a kind of obsessive doubtfulness. It is called samsaya. Samsaya or doubt or doubtfulness or doubtful tendency by itself is nothing, is okay, there is nothing wrong in it. When you become inquisitive to know about something, to know more about something, naturally that inquisitiveness expresses itself as doubts. You want to know more, you want to confirm what you have already studied, you want to make sure that what you have perceived an idea in the right manner, and you may have a doubt. That is okay. There is nothing wrong in it. It is not an obstacle. But sometimes, and this is of course in modern psychiatry, you can find samsaya. lingering doubt, irrational, totally irrational doubts, doubtfulness, which makes it impossible for you to concentrate on anything, to move ahead towards a new job, new idea. That is called samshaya. Now, some of these problems begin to appear only when you turn to spiritual life. And then there is another one, the fourth one is pramada. I mean, what happens is sometimes you have an erratic tendency linked to laziness, and then you find a wrong justification for postponing or procrastinating. Procrastination is the right word for this pramada here. Pramada has got some other meanings also in English, in Sanskrit language. If you read Sanskrit lexicon, dictionary, you find there are other contexts in which the word pramada is used, but in the particular sutra of Patanjali, that is, I think it comes in the Samadhipada, 30th sutra, that is Vihadisthyana, Samsaya, Pramada, Alasya, Viradi, etc. So there, pramada means an erratic tendency and laziness rolled into one, which again in its part creates a tendency to postpone and procrastinate spiritual practices. You want to meditate, oh, maybe I will do next day, some other time. I will start a new life tomorrow. Today is not, I have no time. So, but you will have no problem if you turn your mind to something else. Only in the context of doing spiritual disciplines, all these antarayas, obstacles begin to appear. So that's why Patanjali gives a list of these problems in one sutra. Samadhipada, sutra number 30. So that is pramada. And then alasya means lethargy. That is physical laziness. Mostly it's an attempt, it is related to pramada again. These are all interrelated. These problems are interrelated. Lethargy or laziness. And then avirati. What happens, in avirati? You suddenly get attracted towards things which take you away from spiritual disciplines. So these are interrelated. When you have this laziness, a tendency to postpone and procrastinate spiritual disciplines, and simultaneously you feel your mind is attracted towards something else, watching the TV, watching the internet, which is maybe absolutely of no use for your work or for your professional obligations or anything, still a tendency to spend time because mind is distracted. It's called avirati. And then Brahma. Brahma can mean wrong ideas and delusions, irrational fears and doubts, totally without any justification, any rational explanation, wrong ideas, delusions, wrong thoughts suddenly emerging in the mind, which again manifest as laziness, doubtfulness, irrational doubtfulness, and so on. And then, as a result of all this, you are not able to develop the ability to concentrate on spiritual practices or even to read a book. You want to read a wonderful book, a holy book, let us say. You know it's important for you and you know it will be beneficial for you. But you are not able to concentrate while reading it. That's because you are concentrating on something else towards which your mind is distracted. And then what happens to this inability to concentrate on what you want to do? That's called alabdha bhumigatvam. The ninth antaraya is anavasthitatvam, which means a feeling of unsteadiness, no stability, no steadiness. You are not able to remain, you are not able to practice spiritual disciplines with any level of steadiness or stability. That is called alabdha bhumigatvam. Anavasthitatvam. Anavasthitatvam means no sthairiam, no sthita buddhi, means lack of stability, lack of steadiness. Of course, this again is closely linked to alabdha bhumigatvam, because in the eighth antaraya obstacle, mind is not able to concentrate on the chosen path. And the ninth antarayas, which means lack of steadiness, stability, because you are not able to concentrate, you become unsteady. So each of these antarayas, spiritual obstacles, are interrelated. Now, who is a real yogi? Shankaracharya says a real yogi is yogantaraya varjitaha. A person who has completely conquered, who completely transcended all these obstacles in spiritual life, for whom these obstacles are totally ineffective. These obstacles cannot shake or distract the yogi's mind. And when you are free from all these obstacles, what happens? What's the feeling that you get? Atyantam Sukham asnude. You feel an inner joy, inner contentment, mind is very light, you feel spiritually, you feel contented, and you feel like you are floating in this ocean of blessedness. So that is the state explained in the 28th verse. Now, the next few verses are very profound and very philosophically very profound, very meaningful. How does such a yogi live in this world? How does he react? How does he interact with others? You may say, if you are a spiritually advanced person, and if you are perfectly contented and you are in a state of perpetual blessedness, that is okay for you. But how do we understand a person has reached this level of blessedness? Of course, the simple expression which Max Muller used about Vedanta is very apt here. He says, the sages of Vedic tradition had no one to appease and no one to fight with. I mean, they were thinkers in search of truth, pilgrims of truth, spiritual truth, pilgrims who are taken up in a journey to spiritual realization. That's what happens. That's what happens to a yogi who reaches this level of spiritual evolution. So 29th verse is Sarvabhudastam Atmanam Sarvabhudani cha Atmani Ikshade Yoga Yuktatma Sarvatra Samadarshanaha. Such a yogi whose heart is concentrated on yoga, who has realized this yoga, he develops an equanimity of mind. He develops an eye of evenness for all things. because he beholds, he sees the presence of Atman in all beings, and he beholds the presence of all in his own Atman. So this is the very profound statement. Such a yogi, he has no foreigner, he has no stranger, he has no neighbor. Everyone in this world is non-distinct from himself, non-different from himself. He looks upon all as himself. So there is no otherness. That's the true implication of this sarvatra samadarshanaha. Samadarshitvam in Sanskrit means the ability to see all with the same eye, but the sameness, evenness. No distinction, neither low nor high, all the same. Because he gets established in a state of spiritual unity and spiritual oneness. Interestingly, in the Bhagavad Purana, there is a dialogue between a great king and 9 sages. 9 sages means Navayogi, 9 great spiritual teachers like the yogi we have mentioned. They are called Navayogi, 9 yogis. Please remember, we are not talking about physical exercise when we use the word yoga. Here, yoga means a spiritual seeker who has reached this level of identity with the whole creation. Now, this can happen to any genuine devotee of God. An ideal devotee may read his holy book, may go to his temple or a church or place of worship, may observe his own rituals, but in his reaction with others, he sees all as the children of the same God whom he is worshipping in his temple, whose instructions he is reading in the holy book, and about whom he is hearing from his priest. So, religion extends and transcends and goes beyond the 4 walls of the temple, and religion reaches the hearts of everyone. It's a kind of spiritual egalitarianism, so to speak. So in this dialogue, there are some very fundamental and very profound questions asked by the king to these 9 yogis. The yogis number, Kavir Harir Andariksha Prabuddha Pippalayanaha Avir Hotrotra Durmilas Chamasa Karabhajanaha. Kavi Hari Andariksha Prabuddha Pippalayana Avirhotra Drumila Chamasa Karabhajana. So 9 sages. So when they visited the king in his palace, the king decided to clear some of his doubts on spiritual life. So one question that he asked these sages was, who is an ideal devotee of God? Who is a real devotee? That's the question. No, normally we may expect an answer. A real devotee of God is one who prays to God, who goes to his temple or a place of worship and does rituals, and who reads the holy book, and who tells God loves me, I love God, and so on. This is what we normally expect. But the sage, the yogi, gives a very interesting answer. He says, Sarva bhudeshu yet pasyed Bhagavad bhavam atmanaha bhudani bhagavadi atmani esha bhagavatottamaha. Bhagavatottama means Bhagavatanam Uttama means the highest, the noblest, the purest, the ideal devotee of God. Who is he? That's a definition. Sarvabhuteshu yapasye, the one who sees in all beings the presence of God, and the one who sees all in God. So the real devotee of God is not necessarily a big ritualist, maybe giving $1 million to construct a temple. He may be a good devotee, but that is not a criterion for being a good devotee. A really good devotee is one who sees the presence of God in everyone and who experiences the presence of everyone in God. So, this is the answer. So that's precisely what we get here. Who is an ideal yogi? An ideal yogi is ideal jnani, a man of spiritual knowledge. Actually, the essence of this 29th verse can be a commentary on the highest Advaita philosophy. Sarvabhudastham atmanam sarvabhudani cha atmani ikshade yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshanaha. So this Advaitic unity and oneness, the spiritual unity and oneness of creation and existence. Actually, this is the real foundation of what we now call interfaith dialogue or interspirituality. How do we respect other religions? Why do we respect other religions? Because the great devotees of different religions eventually experience the presence of their chosen deity, God, and then at that state of spiritual growth, that devotee, to whichever religion he may belong, will look upon the whole creation, the whole humanity as the children of the same God. So you can't hate anyone, you can't dislike anyone, you can't be an enemy of anyone, you'll be a friend, you'll be a philosopher of everyone. So this is a natural effect of being a real yogi, a real practitioner of Advaita philosophy, and this is the natural state of an ideal devotee of God. See, it also becomes a kind of a spiritual or ethical philosophy, a kind of spiritual humanism. Humanism based on not belief but the experience of the fundamental unity of humanity. I mean, spiritually, humanity is one family. Because the highest devotee and the highest jnani is same. That's what Shankaracharya actually he writes in this verse on 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, 10th verse. In some versions of the Bhagavad Gita, it may be 11th verse. Maicha ananya yogena bhaktira vibhicharini vivikta desha sevitum anabhirjana samsati. The highest devotee with unwavering devotion, steady, stable devotion, pure devotion. So Bhashyakara writes, the commentator Shankaracharya writes, Achala, Shuddha, Nirmala, Avibhicharini Bhakti, that pure devotion, the unwavering devotion, the steady, pure devotion to God, that is pure knowledge itself, Sacha Jnanam. That the Bhashyakara states. So, this is the essence of this 29th verse. In fact, I can just a few lines from the commentary of Shankaracharya. Idanim yogasya yat phalam brahmayagatva darshanam sarva samsara vicheda karanam tat pradashyate. So, the yoga is defined by Shankaracharya as Brahmaigatva darshanam. the presence of Brahman or Atman in everything and everywhere. So that gives you an evenness of outlook, an equanimity of mind, which is the essence of spiritual humanism, the realization of Jiva Brahma Aikyam, as he calls. It is a means and also an end in itself. Now we will come to the 30th verse. Yo mam pashyadi sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyadi tasyaham na pranasyami sacha me na pranasyati. The one who sees the Lord in all things, and the one who sees all in God, the one who sees God in all things, and the one who sees all in God, that person always remains attached to the Lord, because everywhere he sees nothing but the presence of the divine. Everywhere. When we realize the truth within our hearts, when we realize the divine reality within our hearts, then we will see the same divine everywhere. When we have wrong ideas, undesirable emotions and feelings in our mind, then we see the same in the objects outside. So what we have within ourselves, that we see outside as well. So if a person has attained this level of realization of the divine reality in himself, in his own heart, then he will be seeing the same divine reality outside as well. That's why, and such a person is always living in close proximity with God. He is never far away from God. He is always living in the company of God. That's the idea behind. He is never separated from God. That's why Bhashyakara says in this context, Yo mam pashyadi vasudevam sarvasya atmanam sarvatra sarveshu bhudeshu sarvam cha brahmadi bhudas jadam mai sarvatmani pashyadi tasya evam atmaigatu darshinaha aham ishvaro na pranasyami. Atmaigatu darshinaha means this is how Advaita philosophy or the purest, highest devotion functions in the life of a spiritual seeker. As we advance further and further, our understanding, our definition, our interpretation of the divine reality also changes. At the beginning, we may think, well, God is happy when I am performing some rituals, and He will be unhappy if I don't perform those rituals. Actually, we are portraying God in our own color. We are making Him in our own image. Actually, it is the other way around, I believe. We make God in our own image. Of course, God makes us in His image. That may be true. But there's a greater truth that we make God in our own image. We like certain things, so we believe. And when we get what we like, we become happy. And when we do not get certain things, we become unhappy. So we interpret, we superimpose the same characteristics to God. We think if we go to a temple or a place of worship, do some rituals, He will be very happy. And if we don't follow those rituals, He will be unhappy. He will be angry. He will punish us. This is how we begin our spiritual life, but this is only the kindergarten. And nobody wants to begin his education and then end his education in kindergarten. You have to begin in the kindergarten your education, but you don't want to end. So Shankaracharya says the highest reach of spiritual evolution is Brahmadi Bhuda Jadam Mai Sarvatmani Pasyadi Tasya Evam Atmaikatva Darshinaha. Atmaikatva Darshi means the one who Darshana here means experiencing, not just seeing or believing, but experiencing. When a devotee experiences God as the one divine spark present in everyone and present everywhere, then naturally he is never away from God, he is never separated from God, he is always in the company of God, because God is present to him in his own heart, and there is no place where God is not present, because he feels the presence of God everywhere and in everything. That's why Lord Krishna says, Tasyaham na pranasyami, sachame na pranasyati. He never becomes separated from me, and I never become separated from him, and that's because he sees me in his heart, he sees the Lord, he sees God in his heart, and he sees God everywhere in everyone's heart. That is the highest reach of spiritual practices and devotional disciplines. The same idea continues. These are some of the most celebrated verses in the entire text of Bhagavad Gita. But Lord Krishna gives a graphic picture of the spiritual humanism of a real devotee of God and a real knower of truth. This is again, I should repeat again, this is not a philosophical doctrine alone. It is actually a state of spiritual experience that we have to reach as a part of our spiritual journey that happens, that takes place in our own inner life. And the same idea continues, Sarvabhudasthidam yomam bhajityegattamasthidaha sarvatha vartamanopi sayogi mai vartate. That yogi, that spiritually elevated person, the spiritually illumined person, the yogi, is always established in this ideal of spiritual unity, spiritual oneness. And he worships me. And I am living everywhere. He worships me because I am present everywhere. Whatever his mode of life, that divine spiritual seeker, he lives in me and I live in him. So devotee lives in God because God's presence is felt in the devotee's heart. There are many verses in the Bhagavad Purana which says, the most beautiful and the favorite dwelling place of God is the heart of a devotee. That's a real residence where he wants to live, though frequently we don't allow him to stay there all the time, because there are so many other people living in our hearts. Kama, Krodha, Dvesha, Mada, Malsarya, hatred, aversion, fear, doubt. All these problems are other guests who are living in our hearts. So when God tries to open the door and begins to enter our hearts, frequently he feels there are other guests already who are occupying all the available chairs in the sitting room. So he withdraws. But suppose our heart is free from all these intruding guests. Who are these intruding guests? Anger, aversion, hatred for other people, hatred for people who believe in another religion, in another tradition, just because that person believes God in a different way. So he is not my friend. These feelings, these emotions, these are the intruders who occupy the hearts of devotees who are not living their life, spiritual life properly. So God doesn't enter his heart. But if your heart is pure, free from all these undesirable emotions and feelings, then God straightaway enters the residence. The residence is our own heart. That's why, it says, Yomam pashyadi sarvatra, sarvam cha mai pashyadi, tasyaham na pranasyami, sachamena pranasyati. I am always present in the hearts of those devotees. Because those devotees' hearts are pure, so I can freely go and stay there. So that's why the favorite residence of God is the pure heart of a devotee. That's why, he being sarvabhuta sthidam yomam bhajati egattvamashritaka. Because he is egattvamashritaka means he is established, he is fully settled, he experiences this spiritual unity of existence. So what happens, he always sarvatha vartamanopi. He worships me alone because I am living and dwelling in all beings. And he, my ideal devotee, also has the same compassion, the same friendly attitude towards everyone. In fact, the same idea continues. These are all, again, as I mentioned earlier, some of the most celebrated verses in the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, these verses make this book so grand, so universal, because it is not a book meant for any particular religious tradition, belonging to any particular religious tradition. This book, these verses portray the spiritual journey of any sincere spiritual seeker. A state of spiritual evolution that everyone should aspire to reach and experience. Atma uvamena sarvatra samam pashyadi Arjuna sukham va yadiva dukkham sayogi paramo matah. He who judges the pressure and pain everywhere by the same standard as he applies himself, that yogi is regarded as the highest. Atma uvamena sarvatra. If I like certain things, then I should assume others too like those things. I should not imagine that what I like may not be desirable to others. What I like, what I consider to be desirable, I should assume that should be desirable for others also. That means we should be able to behave towards others in a way that we want others to behave towards ourselves. Our attitude towards others should be the same as we assume to be the other person's attitude towards us. We should treat others as we want to be treated by others. So that's a simple way of putting things. This is what happens when a person reaches that level of spiritual unity, because he feels the presence of God within him and he feels the presence of God in everything and everywhere. Now sometimes you find even people who are not conventional sages, like a man like Gandhi, for example, Mahatma Gandhi. He was not a monk, but his life was that of a monk in a way, because he was leading a very spiritual life. Though he was a politician, he was the national leader of freedom struggle in India for decades. Now, you find Gandhiji, in fact, during his life, he even played a very important role in some of the reform movements associated with temple proclamation, temple entry proclamations. He fought for the entry of people who are excluded, who are kept outside social parameters, he wanted them to be admitted to the temple. So he actually led agitations for the privileges to be restored to the downtrodden classes, so that they should be allowed to visit temples. So he fought against social injustices. But very rarely do we hear about Gandhi going to a temple and performing rituals. Though he was all the time leading agitations, it happened on a few occasions. These are well-known events in his life, where he led agitations for the sake of the downtrodden classes, leading agitations against local kings and rulers, so that the downtrodden classes should be allowed to enter temples, for freedom to enter the temples. But he himself hardly ever performed any formal rituals in any temple as we normally do. But he looked upon all as the presence, as the embodiments of the Lord. You use the word Hari Jana, means Hari is the synonym for Vishnu, God. So sometimes these great ideas can be found being practiced by great men and great women who are not necessarily followers of any particular religion in the conventional sense. That he was a traditional Hindu, he was proud of being a Hindu. Gandhi was very proud of his Hindu faith, which he believed, which he practiced. But at the same time, going beyond the conventional definitions of religion, he extended the scope and definition of religion to a level of universal spiritual humanism. If you believe in God, the belief in God should manifest as spiritual humanism, compassion, broad-mindedness, love and sympathy for other living beings. Of course, there are verses in the Gita and in the Upanishads and the Vedas which tells you that this compassion should not be limited to fellow human beings. It should be extended to other living beings and also even to nature. Because the entire cosmic existence is one for a spiritual seeker who has reached this state of spiritual evolution. Yogi, that's a word used here. Paramarthadarshi, Atmaigattodarshi, Bhashagara Shankaracharya says, Atmaigattodarshi, the one who sees the same Atman in everyone, in everything, as in himself or herself. So for such a person, religion and spirituality transcend the barriers of cultures and nationalities and other boundaries and extend the entire existence. So we'll continue this discussion in the next session, next week. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.